Hello everybody, I'm charmed to be with you today to have an opportunity to talk about some of the things that we wish would be available for our children and some of the things we know our children can do to make their lives better and everybody's life better. We are preparing children in education for a world which we cannot define or maybe even imagine. And what are the skills that they will need for that world? I think paramount, the skill that will be required is the ability to have empathy. What I mean by that is maybe a little different from what you might think. Typically, people have understood empathy to mean perspective taking. And yes, that is empathy, it's the cognitive part. But it's also the part that allows you to be a mass murderer because you can understand enough, but you don't care. So the affective side of empathy is the really human side of empathy. And it's the side of empathy that we really need to require emotional literacy to really develop. And we live in a world that's emotionally illiterate. We have not looked at that capacity of our humanity as an area that needs to be cultivated in much the same way as we've looked at STEM, which is a fairly recent last 15 years that we've really concentrated on that group of learning, science and math. And emotional literacy gives every child, every person, I would say, the ability to understand their own feelings, to be able to name them, to be able to be conversant with them, to be able to read the emotional cues of others. The way we do that in Roots of Empathy, which is a program for school children, is to bring a baby into the classroom so that the children can be coached to observe how that little baby is feeling at various points during an hour, and to learn the names of those feelings and then be coached to reflect on a time that you might have had those feelings yourself. So what comes with this empathy is the ability to be in relationship, the ability to make a friend. It is really critical skill for a child to be able to make a friend. It's your armor for childhood, it's your armor for life. And we know now in longevity studies, it's not blueberries and yogurt that make for longevity. It's relationships. It's the ability to make relationships and maintain relationships. And if you know anybody who's suffered a painful break in any kind of relationship, very often they will say, well, she never really got me. Meaning, there wasn't felt that the person was understood, or that there was mutual emotional understanding. So I think cultivating empathy in this generation of children will do us well for many generations to come. And I'd like to say that all learning in school and all learning in life, formal and informal, is state dependent. And that's not something we typically think about. What I mean is that it depends on how you feel in the moment. What is your state? Just like when you think about your little babies, you cannot make a baby eat if they're not hungry. You cannot make a baby sleep if they're not tired. Never mind all the other learnings that go on in those early years. You can whistle Dixie. The baby has to be predisposed and want to be able to learn, to be receptive. And when we're in school and we're formally helping children to live their lives, the best life they have for today, and to be well dressed for tomorrow, in the world that we cannot even imagine, it's so exciting really, and a little bit frightening, the best thing that we can do is to help them to know themselves. And the best thing we can do is to support them in forming friendships and relationships, to know how to talk about how you feel. And I'm not talking about dreadfully deep and serious, sad things. I'm talking about sharing your joy. I'm talking about sharing your interests. And you know, you probably would remember we've talked a lot about music, thank you, Andy, in this little while we've had together. So, Desperado, the Eagles song, your prison is walking in this world all alone. If we can help children in school learn how to relate as well as learn how to read, we have given them the world. And I think this whole business of resilience is something that is understood sometimes in more of I guess I would say, a scientific way or a psychological way. I think about resilience as simply bouncing back. Children need to be resilient, and they are born with different predispositions and different levels of resilience. What we can do about it is help the child know themselves, and it's a continuum. We are born with different levels, inherent levels of resilience, but it is policies and people around the child. Schools have a massive positive influence on who children become, how happy they are, how productive they are, how they really look at themselves. You learn all that in school. So we need policies that support teachers and schools to do the very best that they can do. This crisis of connection, it is everywhere. And I was so surprised when I was invited by the Minister of Loneliness in England to come and chat with her some years ago. And first of all, I thought someone was teasing me because I used to go on a lot about loneliness. No, Siri Bob, she was serious and she had an agenda. And it wasn't just loneliness with the aged. She wanted to talk to me about loneliness in childhood. And I've always said that a child who is sad, sick, or lonely cannot learn. And we don't think about that. Teachers are so aware of children being hungry. Schools are so responsible. Here in Scotland, my goodness, you've got policies underway to address poverty, which is most obvious in hunger, in little children, in groups. But this idea of being able to address a whole variety of things that relate to children being resilient, I think is heroic. And schools aren't just places where children learn. They're places where they become. They are your ministry of education, yes, but they are your ministry of peace. And when you have inclusive schools, it doesn't matter if you come in a wheelchair, a high chair, or even a rocking chair. You are welcome. There is the classroom, there's the boardroom, and there's the war room. And if we can just build empathy so that all of the people who are going to be in all of those places have the capacity for empathy, it would be incredible. It's Martin Luther's I and thou. It's the idea that we can absolutely reach out and find one another. I think another thing that's really needed in all of these times is a synchronizing mind. How can we help children to see, not just in the media, not just what's in front of your nose, but what's in front of your life? What are all the various things that need to be considered? And we tend to isolate, not schools, but society tends to isolate things so that they're compartmentalized. But really, a full human being is able to put all those senses together, put all that information together, and bring together something that is meaningful and sustainable. Thinking of another musical connection, there were two actually that I'm thinking of. Leonard Cohen, that was mentioned earlier, I think yesterday, that where there's a crack, the light gets in. Well, the pandemic was the crack. So was social media a crack, where harm got in and light got in. And I think the task of those who have the privilege of touching childhood, because quite honestly, it's not a garden for every child, and it is a springtime of humanity for sure, but it's for each child, they're not a flower. They feel they're weeds. And here we have schools where people can make all the difference and see every child as a flower and give every child the ability to understand who they are and what their possibility is in making connection to others. So I would like to close with Pink Floyd. And this is related to empathy. And I don't know, what was it, The Dark Moon, what was it? Oh, I love you, you know that. Oh, how fantastic. Okay, so let's just say, two strangers chanced to pass in the street, and I am you, and what I saw is me. And that is what empathy is. And I think we all have the capacity for it in some chamber of our heart. to be able to open it and not be afraid, and not allow sad, sick, and lonely feelings to overwhelm us, but to allow us to find the light in one another and to be joyful. And I feel very joyful to be amongst you, and thank you very much.
Thank you.